Hello friends, welcome to Buffy's Pack. For those who new on this channel, my name is Julia and this channel is dedicated to our canecorso Buffy. And in this seed pod I will tell you about our life with Buffy in the city, in the big industrial city Dnipro, in the small Soviet flat. How did we cope with such life? How did we manage Buffy's diabetes and all the challenges we were met with? Thank you. Let's see.
Ten years ago, when Buffy was 8 years old, I moved to the city of Dnipro, one of the biggest cities in Ukraine. It is mostly a business city or industrial city, but my grandma had a flat there, and she kindly offered us to live there while she stayed at my parents' home with my mom. I was thrilled to accept this proposition because I always wanted to try an independent way of living. Though I knew that it would be not easy with Buffy, I moved anyway. The plan was to find a part-time job, 4 hours no more, or develop my freelance to the level that would let me financially support myself and Buffy. The living cost of the flat was free for me, so it was a great option. So in the autumn of 2015, we moved. I gathered all my and Buffy's things. All of my family helped me to do this bold step. The living conditions were modest by the modern views, to say the least. The flat did not change from Soviet times, I would say. It was all covered with carpets and had no washing machine, with old windows, old wooden windows, which easily let the wind through. But anyway, I was happy. Perhaps that was my ADHD trait as I see it now, because at the time I did not know it about myself. I just love to start new things. I adore it. Buffy always gave me the courage to do something new and to be responsible. As I said before, she was teaching me, not otherwise. She was teaching me how to live among people and how to be a decent human being. In the first months of our life in the city, our first challenge was just to adjust my routine, or develop my routine from the start, develop our routine, explore the area, and really seriously consider our options, my options, towards a part-time job. I cannot separate my life from Buffy's life, because one was strongly dependent on the other and vice versa. So, I made and sent my resumes while learning how to cook for myself, laundering with my hands, cleaning the flat every day, walking Buffy twice a day, feeding Buffy, of course, washing Buffy, cleaning after Buffy, and so on. I'm sure you are all familiar with this routine, who have canecorso now, but one thing is to read about it somewhere, and completely another is to do it. So eventually I started to doubt my abilities to be able to work, even part-time. But still, I continued to search for such jobs. Let's say that I tried quite a lot of opportunities, quite a lot of options. Most of them required an extrovert personality, which I am not at all, or hard manual labor, physical labor, with very low pay. So it was all very frustrating and demotivating. Not to say that I was in constant worry about Buffy, because as I said in the previous videos, insulin did not always act as it's supposed to. Sometimes her sugar level dropped unexpectedly and became too low, so I had to be with her at that moment to save her life. That's why I developed a habit of always carrying candy in my pocket, because it was not once that I saved her life with this emergency treat. So to make the story short, I dropped the idea of getting employed and started to develop another idea of getting a proper freelance occupation. Because for the few years before our move, I developed my photography skills and had the proper equipment for subject photography. I was hoping to continue to learn photography, to be able to shoot for micro stocks. So I brought with me lighting equipment and my SLR camera. But the lack of objects for my sessions soon enough made itself evident. Since I had very little funds, I couldn't afford to buy them, even if it was food ingredients. To be honest, I had to learn from professionals, but it of course cost money too. So eventually I had to sell my equipment except for the camera, and I switched to another idea, learning vector illustration. Because in my circumstances, it was the more realistic approach. I had all I needed for this occupation, except for skills, of course, so I had to learn it from scratch. So I did. I had all the time on my hands, as I thought, though it wasn't much time because taking care of not very healthy canecorso and keeping the flat in more or less good condition and so on, food preparing and so on, it all takes time, as I realized quickly enough. Anyway, I firmly decided I would stick to it. With time, I got some income from microstocks, and I liked this occupation more and more because it allowed me to be almost completely independent, and it seemed like all income depended on my skills, my talent, my ability to organize the process, and so on. No option in other fields would give me such opportunities, especially with my circumstances. This is where I was standing at that time. Now let's talk about what our typical day looked like. First of all, I've just remembered this funny moment. The balcony of my grandma's flat looked into the schoolyard. So each morning, except for summer months, I woke up to the deafening music to which the children did their morning exercises. It was one of the brightest, not the brightest, but one of the most peculiar memories from those times. Usually, Buffy slept near my bed. No matter how good her place was, she slept nearby. As many canecorso owners say, these dogs are like our shadows. They always follow us, but in a gentle, unobtrusive way. So I woke up, gave Buffy her insulin injection, gave her food around 30 minutes later, had my breakfast, and then we went out for our 1-hour morning walk. Usually, we walked on a big avenue nearby where all the local dogs were walking. It was very beneficial to me to have a walk, almost first thing in the morning, because usually at this time of the day, I was feeling overwhelmed or with a complete mess in my head. Let's say like this. I had to clear my mind. I needed to have some time to understand what to do today, and so on. And of course, I needed some coffee, because coffee is my elixir of life. Or as I joking sometimes, it is a part of my blood formula. Sometimes we also do some grocery shopping along with Buffy's walks, if needed. And then we went back to our flat. I washed her paws, cleaned a flat if necessary, and began my studying or drawing any vector project I had in mind that day. Usually this time I developed a skill to learn and draw and do my cooking at the same time, because I couldn't focus for too long. Couldn't focus for 3 to 4 to 5 hours straight as some people do. So I needed some interruptions to make, and of course I needed to cook food, to have something to eat. All the food I cooked myself, obviously. No restaurants, no cafes, no maid to cook my dinner. Anyway, I was glad to do it, because I did not have much opportunity to do it before. I liked cooking. It was kind of another creative occupation of mine. So, during the day we had such mixed occupations which combined drawing, learning how to draw, cooking, sometimes laundering, sometimes planning, and journaling. I am a fan of journaling because it was always so that I can think best when I write. And in the evening, I repeated my morning's routine with Buffy. I gave her insulin, then food, and after dinner, we went out for a second walk. On some evenings, we combined this second walk with the daunting task of bringing drinking water to the flat. The local tap water, as it is a rule in Ukraine, goes with chlorine for disinfection. So I couldn't drink it. It was too smelly for me. I was used to drinking normal water, cleaned and filtered without chemicals, as we had in our home. So in the city, we had many services that offered filtered water delivery to flats. Sometimes I could afford it, but sometimes I did not. So, on some evenings, I took an empty bottle. It was like 5 to 6 liters bottle, and we with Buffy went to a nearby store that sold filtered water on the spot. Sometimes it was a risky occupation because I had to control Buffy and carry a heavy bottle at the same time. There were different weather conditions, of course, and as much as I love such animated weather, it was potentially dangerous. That's where my trick with the collar came in handy. As I explained in the previous video, I raised her collar so she wouldn't have the ability to pull me over when something dangerous or irritating for her may happen, because she was sometimes a little bit jumpy, especially when some small dogs were barking. Beagles, especially. Beagles and Dachshunds were our favorite, just kidding, because it was a rare occasion that a beagle or a Dachshund did not bark on Buffy. Usually they did. So I had to be prepared. You can imagine that with such a routine, I did not have much strength left to go for a job, even a part-time job. And I forgot to mention that while I fed Buffy a raw diet every weekend, I went to the local market and bought meat for her food. It was like 8 to 10 kilograms of meat that I was bringing back in my hands. It wasn't easy either, but the difficulty was that I couldn't afford quality meat. Therefore, I bought mostly tripe, meat trimmings, cheap small fish, and chicken carcasses. Besides, if you know what tripe is, it requires cleaning and washing, and it stinks like hell. So each weekend I had this operation, I would call it, to wash this tripe in the bathroom, to cut excessive fat off, divide other meats, and put it into the freezer for the next week. I honestly say, I couldn't manage this routine for too long, for a long time, because it was really hard labor. The other reason, as I mentioned before, was that Buffy's insulin wasn't stable enough as it was on the kibble, so I decided to switch her to kibble eventually. It was a relief, to be honest, because the kibble was delivered to the flat, and the only worry I had then was to have money to pay for it. That's how usually our routine and our life looked like. Of course, sometimes on weekends we went to a nearby park. I tried to find the place for Buffy's unrestricted running, to let her explore the area, and checked her response to my commands. Maybe to meet some other dogs too. But I was careful with other dogs because, as I said before, Buffy wasn't very socialized with her kind. I did not have such an opportunity in my little town, so we mostly tried to stay away. Here I want to add how pleased and surprised I was at Buffy's behavior in our circumstances, in these quite restricted conditions we had. It seemed like she was learning to live in these conditions as well as I did, and she did it well. For all these 3 years, she never had aggressive behavior, not even slightly intimidating behavior. The only little accident was when some drunk man passed us. Too close, perhaps, so she could sniff he was drunk. I guess it was a late winter night, and I heard Buffy growling a little bit, but he passed by and nothing happened. That was all I heard from her, I guess, for all her life. Not only in these 3 years, but generally, she was a very balanced dog, very balanced and very intelligent. It seemed like she analyzed the situation each time, and she was very sensitive to my behavior, So each time when she felt that I was nervous, a little more than usual, she was alert too. So that's why I'm sure that a canecorso owner must be under full control of his emotions and his or her reactions, because their canecorso would read it instantly. Buffy was very in tune with my emotions, and that ability was not only shown by her when we were outside, but also in our day-to-day life when she felt that I was upset, or even when I was watching some sentimental movie and got upset. She came to me, gave her paw on my knees, often with her heavy head too, and asked with her eyes if anything happened. I don't like to humanize dogs. I know dogs' nature, but I cannot find other words to describe this, because her eyes always had a thought in them. They were asking questions or processing things, in a dog's ways, of course. I think those who have canecorso know what I mean. Only years after I realized that Buffy, perhaps, was what in the Western world people call a soul dog. She was a friend, the best friend I ever had, and perhaps I ever will. There were a few prompting reasons that helped to finally decide to pursue a freelance career. There were cases with Buffy that led to it. Except for diabetes, she was prone to separation anxiety. A few times, my neighbors said to me that each time I left home, she started to whimper, and eventually she developed a habit of chewing the carpet in the corridor, which I did not know about. I didn't notice it. She'd do it very gently, and one day she got very sick. We went to the vet, and we brought Buffy to the vet clinic. By the way, I was lucky to have our old doctor from Buffy's puppyhood who opened his own vet clinic in my district, so we had good support, veterinary support nearby. We did an ultrasound test and checked her blood, but the doctors couldn't understand what was going on. She began to look very ill. She had an upset stomach and a bad appetite. It was a story for a whole week or so. I had to care for her all day now because our vet put a catheter in her paw, so I could apply an intravenous drip and deliver the solutions she required. So it was quite a serious treatment to her, but nothing helped, until as a last resort I found some homeopathic treatment on the internet and started to give her those drops, and in a few days, this chewed carpet went out of her, and she finally got better. So after these quite challenging times, I took the final decision to not apply to any jobs anymore, because it was simply impossible for me to maintain all I had to maintain, and I couldn't afford to lose her, especially for such trivial and stupid reasons. Another type of adventure we had together was our trips home. From time to time, we went to our parents' home, and of course, I couldn't afford a taxi, or my relatives couldn't help me with the car, so most of the time we drove home on public transport. So, you can imagine, I hope you can, how a quite slight woman with a gigantic dog and 2 to 3 bags in her hands was traveling on public transport. Sometimes it was hilarious to see how big muscular men tried to keep their distance from us, while children asked if they could pet my dog. The journey took us about 2 hours and 3 kinds of transport, and I strongly suspect that with another breed it would be completely impossible to do. But with canecorso it was possible and manageable. Of course, it wasn't easy for both of us, but as I said before, each time she surprised me with her cooperation. Of course, I put a muzzle on her when we were in the transport. The only problem with Buffy when we traveled like this was her size. She wasn't conscious of it and freely occupied as much space as she needed, because more often than not there were too many people in the transport. But she never minded correcting her pose unless I asked her to. She was very obedient, even meek in the transport. I felt she did not like it, and neither did I, especially in the summer, but she did it very well. Anyway, we didn't do these trips on the hot summer days because she never was quite tolerant to heat, She loved the sun, but she suffered from it. That's the paradox of canecorso, I guess. I'm sorry if this story sounds a bit fragmented, if I can say so, and emotional. It's been 10 years since that time, and 4 years since Buffy's gone. But I still remember how it was felt. Great times, challenging, but great times. Anyway, to summarize it all, what conclusions I can make from such an experience? What would be useful for you to know about it? First of all, if you have the intention to live with your canecorso in a restricted space, let's say in a flat, I would say don't worry about space. Canecorso, provided it has enough physical activity, would certainly adjust to such living conditions very well. They are very careful to walk past furniture and things and stuff in the flat. Sometimes they can get emotional, but it's all quite manageable. Buffy was emotional only when we had guests, and I had to tie her up at that time because she was too agitated sometimes, but in a good way. So, the main problem in living with such dogs in the city, it's the difficulty in adjusting a person's lifestyle to the needs of your dog. If you have a full-time job and you don't have friends or family members to care for your dog, I don't think you can have such dogs at all. Leaving a dog for 7 to 8 hours alone doesn't seem to be a responsible approach. I cannot imagine how people can combine even part-time jobs with caring for such dogs, with training them, with the routine that they should get. I'm afraid they do not do it properly, that such dogs live in restricted conditions, or they do not get socialized as they should. So ideally, to be able to care about healthy canecorso, even more so unhealthy canecorso dog, you must have a support system. You must have financial funds, of course, not imaginary ones, not future ones, but real funds to support you. You must provide your dog with medical insurance if you have such an option. In Ukraine, we didn't have such a possibility. And there were so many times when I dreamed about it, because even with my low income, I would spend some money on the insurance, gladly. You must realistically see that this dog requires work efforts towards maintenance, washing, combing, grooming, training, constant, everyday socialization, and quality feeding. Like any other dog, of course. The difference with canecorso is that it is a potential weapon. When you look at this honestly, canecorso in the wrong hands or raised irresponsibly may become a potential or actual weapon. Canecorso is very devoted to her family and an owner, and she will protect her people at any cost, no matter whether you are training for protection or not. Canecorso has an innate guardian instinct, a very strong instinct. So you must be very diligent to see that this instinct will not be provoked. Or if it will, you must have the ability, knowledge, and experience to manage it. And all of that comes with your day-to-day efforts in training your dog without excuses or holidays. So, yes, canecorso can live in the flats, in small spaces, be around people, and adjust to noisy and crowded surroundings. In the right hands and with the correct attitude, this breed will never disappoint you, and the efforts will return to you tenfold.
Thank you for watching this video. I hope it was useful to you and interesting. See you in the next ones.